press the bell icon on the YouTube app and never miss another update.
Namaste children. Let us continue with the topic organisms and populations. In our last class we discussed about the distribution of biomes and also about the terminology like biological like, habitat, organisms, community and populations. In this class we will discuss about abiotic factors present in the environment. See, abiotic means living, abiotic means non-living. So, under abiotic factors we have four important factors: temperature, water, light and soil. These are the four important abiotic factors we are going to discuss in this class. So, temperature. So, temperature is most relevant abiotic factors present in the environment. It is very important, and temperature is going to be vary from one place to another place or from one area to another area. So, the temperature is 0, below 0 or 0 in polar areas, 0 degrees Celsius or below that in polar areas, and more than 50 degrees Celsius in tropical deserts, and also it may increase more than 100 degrees Celsius in thermal springs and in hydrothermal vents. So, it may be below 0 degrees Celsius, it is maybe below 0 degrees Celsius in polar areas, or it may increase, that means more than 50 degrees Celsius in tropical deserts during summer, that is in summer, and it may increase more than, it is present more than 100 degrees Celsius in thermal springs and hydrothermal vents. And the temperature is also going to be decreased from the equator towards the poles. Temperature is going to decrease from the equator towards the poles and from the plains to mountain tops. Temperature is going to be decreased from the equator towards the poles and also from the plains to mountain tops, and it may be below 0 degrees Celsius in polar area and more than 50 degrees Celsius in tropical deserts in summer and more than 100 degrees Celsius in thermal springs and hydrothermal vents. And so, sun is mainly responsible for the temperature. So, temperature affects on geographical distribution. Temperature affects on geographical distribution. So, we know that mango trees which are present in tropical forest, mango trees which grow in tropical forests will not grow in temperate forests, or it cannot be grown in temperate areas like in Canada and Germany. And one more, they have given snow leopards cannot be found in Kerala forest. Found in Kerala forests. And one more, tuna fish are rarely caught in tropical latitudes in ocean. So these three are examples for the effects on geographical distribution. So mango trees which grow in tropical and subtropical forests cannot be grown in temperate forests or in temperate areas like in Canada and Germany, and snow leopards cannot be seen in Kerala forest. Like the tuna fish rarely caught in a latitude tropical oceans. Behind latitude tuna fish, it's rarely caught in latitude of tropical oceans. Next we'll discuss effects of temperature on physiology. Temperature effects on physiology. Temperature effects on physiology. So temperature, it affects kinetics of enzymes. It affects kinetics of enzymes. So we know that enzymes will have their optimum pH and temperature for their function to start. So below that temperature and above that temperature, enzymes are non-functional. So this temperature directly affects the kinetics of enzymes. Through that it disturbs basal metabolism. Through that it disturbs basal metabolism and other physiological functions of our body. So effects on physiology, these temperature affects the kinetics of enzymes, functions of enzymes, because enzymes have their particular pH and temperature. So below that temperature and above that temperature, they are non-functional. They are going to be above that temperature, they become denaturated. Proteins are going to be destroyed. So this temperature affects kinetics of enzymes. So through that it disturbs basal metabolism and other physiological functions of our body. So one more we can tell, Logger's rule. What it tells means, it tells the organisms which live in warmer climates are more pigmented than the organisms which live in colder climates. So what it tells? Organisms which live in warmer climates are more pigmented to tolerate that sunlight. So they are more pigmented than the animals, than the organisms in colder climates. So these are examples of temperature effects on physiology. Then temperature effects on morphology. So according to Allen's rule, he tells that the animals or the mammals which live in colder climates will have their ear, tail and legs are smaller in size. Tail, ears and legs of mammals living in colder climate possesses or will have shorter tail, ears and legs of mammals are present in animals which live in colder climates. What it is? This presence of shorter tail, ears and legs in mammals which are present in colder climates, that is Allen's rule. Allen's rule tells that presence of shorter ear, limbs and tail is seen in the mammals which live in colder climates. And one more is there, that is Bregman's rule. So this person tells the size of an organism which live in colder climate will be larger when compared to the organisms which live in warmer climates. So size of an organisms will be larger in colder climates than in organisms which live in warmer climates. Warmer climates. What's the Bregman's rule tells? The organisms which live in colder regions or colder area, the size of that organism will be larger when compared to the organisms which live in warmer climates. That is about the effects, temperature effects on morphology. And organisms are classified into two types based on their tolerance of temperature. Organisms are classified into two types based on tolerance of temperature. Based on tolerance of temperature, organisms are classified into euthermal organisms and stenothermal organisms. So, based on tolerance of temperature, organisms are classified into two types. One is euthermal, another one is stenothermal. So, euthermal means here the organisms are tolerate. These organisms are able to live in the organisms are able to live in wide range of temperature. Eure means wide, steno means narrow. So the organisms are able to thrive and live in wide range of temperature are called euthermal organisms, and those organisms are called euthermal organisms. So what are euthermal organisms? So the organisms are, when they are able to live in wide range of temperatures, are called euthermal organisms. Steno means narrow. Eure means wide. So here the organisms which are able to live in narrow range of temperature are called organisms which can tolerate narrow range of temperature are called stenothermal organisms. They are called stenothermal organisms. So organisms are classified into two types based on their tolerance. If they are able to tolerate wide range of temperature, that is more than 60 to 100 degrees Celsius, those organisms are called euthermal organisms. The organisms which are able to tolerate narrow range of temperatures, that is, they are called stenothermal organisms. That means below 0 degrees Celsius. So they all come under stenothermal organisms. Nowadays we know that due to deforestation and global warming, temperature of the earth is increasing day by day. If this continues, that is going to affect the life of an organism. Some species may become extinct. So that is about temperature. Then we will move with another abiotic factor, that is water. Water is very, very important abiotic factor. So the productivity of that is plants, vegetation, everything depends upon water, and life, the first life exists in water. So without water, life cannot survive. It is unsustainable. Life cannot survive on this earth without water. So water is very, very important for plants and animals, and the productivity of plants mainly depend upon water, and animals are going to depend on plants. Like this, they are all chain link, and the availability of water is less in desert areas. The availability of water is less in desert areas. There we see some adaptations in organisms which live in desert areas, like camel. So they meet their water requirement by the oxidation of fat which is stored in the hump. And kangaroo rat, so they releases concentrated urine. Like this, some adaptations are there which makes them to live in that less water condition also. And the aquatic organisms, we know that the aquatic organisms cannot face any problem with water because they are present inside the water, but it is not true. The pH and composition of water is very, very important for the survival of species in water. So pH and composition of water is very important for the aquatic organisms to survive in water. So in that, salinity means presence of salt in the water. The salinity of water is measured in terms of parts per thousand. It is measured in terms of parts per thousand, ppt. parts per thousand. So we have salinity, salt concentration is less than 5 in inland waters, that is in river, and salt concentration between 30 to 35 in sea water, and it is more than 100 parts per thousand in hypersaline lagoons. There are more than 100 in hypersaline lagoons. What is hypersaline? They say if this is a sea. So hypersaline means it is near to sea but it is separated from the sea. This water is separated from the sea, or it may be surrounded by the rocks or sand. So this is called hypersaline lagoons. So these are separated from the main sea. In this we see the salt concentration is more than parts per thousand, more than 100 parts per thousand. This you should remember for your competitive exam. Salinity, salt concentration is less than 5 in inland water, between 30 to 35 in sea water, and more than 100 parts per thousand in hypersaline lagoons. Lagoons means it's a water body which is totally separated from the sea. It is either surrounded by sand or it may be surrounded by rocks. So there we see salt concentration is more than 100 parts per thousand. And again, based on the tolerance of salinity, organisms are again classified into urea-haline organisms and stenohaline organisms. Based on the tolerance of salinity, we have two types: urea-haline organisms and stenohaline organisms. So again, urea-haline organisms means the organisms which can tolerate wide range of salinity are called urea-haline organisms. What are urea-haline organisms? These organisms can tolerate wide range of salinities. Example for this we can see seal. Stenohaline organisms, so they can tolerate, these organisms are able to live in narrow range of salinities. Tolerate and live in wide range of salinity. Tolerate and live in narrow range of salinity. So example, freshwater bodies or the organisms which live in water. So in urethermal and stenothermal, we can take examples like archaebacteria. These organisms are able to live in extreme conditions, in high temperature also and in very low temperature also. Here for urea-haline, we can take example seal and hermit crab, and stenohaline freshwater bodies. This is about water. The availability of water is mainly due to the precipitation. Precipitation means what? The rain. Precipitation includes rain and snow. So the third abiotic factor is light. So again, for the temperature and light, main source is sun, and the light is very important because autotrophs for the photosynthesis to occur, they depend on light. So it mainly helps in photosynthesis in plants. It mainly helps in photosynthesis in plants, and also plants depend on light for photoperiodism. Photoperiodism. So under photoperiodism, the last year you learnt about long day plants, short day plants, and day neutral plants. So long day plants means these plants are going to flower after 12 hours of when they exposed to sunlight for more than 12 hours. These plants, long day plants, are going to flower after exposing to sunlight for more than 12 hours. They are called long day plants. Short day plants means these plants are going to flower after exposing to sunlight less than 12 hours. Day neutral plants means these plants can flower between 5 to 24 hours in a day. 5 to 24 hours in a day means they are not dependent on light for flowering. They are called day neutral plants. So plants depends on light for photoperiodism, that means for flowering. Long day plants means they require the plants should expose to sunlight more than 12 hours. Short day plants means they are able to flower when they expose to sunlight for less than 12 hours. Day neutral plants means they flower within 5 to 24 hours in a day. That means they are independent of light. And also this light is responsible. It helps for animals for their foraging activity, migratory activity, and reproduction activities. So light is mainly responsible, or it gives cues to the animals for the foraging activity. Means forage means in search of food. They will go in search of food in presence of light. And migratory activity, the intensity and duration of light depends. The next class will discuss about homeotherms, that is conformers, like that. So if they are not able to tolerate temperature, then they shift to other area. So that means it helps in migratory activities, and also it is responsible for reproduction in organisms. So it helps animals for their foraging, migratory and reproduction activity. And some plants are able to live in very shallow areas by using low intensity of light for photosynthesis. They are called skyophytes. What are skyophytes? These are plants which utilizes low intensity of light for photosynthesis. These are called skyophytes. Hagene heliophytes means these are plants which require high intensity of light for photosynthesis. They require high intensity of light for photosynthesis. So like this, light is very important for the survival of organisms on this earth. It mainly helps in photosynthesis in plants, and also plants depend for their flowering on the light, that is called photoperiodism, and it helps in animals for their foraging, migratory and reproductive activities. And some plants require low intensity of light for photosynthesis. They are called Skyophytes, and some plants require high intensity of light for photosynthesis. They are called Heliophytes. And in the ocean, more than 500 meter, the depth of the ocean, the organisms are not known about the celestial source of sun. That means more than 500 meter in depth of the sea or in ocean, so there is absence, it is perpetually dark in that area. There is no availability of sunlight. Those organisms utilizes, animals which live in that area utilizes spectrum of light. They utilizes spectrum of light for the survival, and even plants utilizes spectrum of light for the photosynthesis. So in the ocean, more than 500 meter in depth, that is at the bottom of the ocean, the availability of sun is 0, but they utilize the sunlight by spectrum of light, and we know that ultraviolet component of the spectrum is harmful to some organisms, and not all the wavelengths of spectrum of light is not available for marine organisms. And one more point, in the depth of the ocean we see the presence of red algae than green algae. In the bottom or in the depth of the ocean we see the presence of red algae when compared to green algae, because this red algae is having a pigment called phycoerythrin. Which absorbs blue-green wavelength of visual spectrum, that helps in photosynthesis. That's why in the depth of the ocean we see red algae in more when compared to green algae, because of the presence of pigment called phycoerythrin, which is able to absorb blue-green wavelength of spectrum that mainly helps in photosynthesis. So that is about light. Then another one is soil. So it is the top layer of earth on which living organism, and plants live. So it is the top layer of earth on which living organisms and plants live, and study about soil is called pedology. What is pedology? Study about soil is called pedology, and soil mainly provides water, mineral salts, and anchorage. Anchorage means support. Anchorage to plants. Soil mainly provides water, mineral salts and anchorage to plants. And this soil, the characteristics of soil which favors the vegetation is mainly depend upon the climate and weathering processes. It is mainly depend upon the climate and weathering processes. The characteristics of the soil which supports the vegetation mainly depend upon the climate and weathering processes. What is weathering processes? The formation of soil by the rocks by a physical and chemical process is called weathering processes. The formation of soil by rocks by the physical and biochemical process is called weathering. So the characteristics of soil mainly depend upon the climate and weathering processes. With this, pH and mineral composition, pH and mineral composition and topography defines this. With this climate and weathering processes, pH and mineral composition and topography decides the type of vegetation present in that habitat. It describes the type of vegetation present in the ecosystem. And if the vegetation productivity of the plants is good, because animals are dependent on plants, and that vegetation defines the type of animals which survive in that habitat. Even this is also important in the benthic zone of ocean. In the depth sediment present in the ocean, the soil, the type of soil present in the sediment at the last layer of the sea, that is depth of the ocean, that also determines which type of animals are present in that area. So bottom dwelling animals, the type of animals which are present in benthic zone of ocean or water bodies mainly depend on again the soil. So that characteristics of soil is dependent on what? It is dependent on climate and weathering processes with pH, mineral composition and topography. So we have three types of soil. Sandy soil and clay soil and loamy soil. Sandy soil is having high percolation and less water holding capacity. Whereas clay soil is having less percolation and high water holding capacity. And loamy soil is having high percolation and high water holding capacity. So for the productivity, for the vegetation, to get good productivity, the loamy soil is very important for the plants because it is having high percolation so that the minerals can enter and reach the tip of the root also. If there is less percolation, the minerals will not reach, like nitrates. Nitrates are very important for the plant's growth. So this percolation helps to minerals to enter the root and they reach root tip also. And high water holding capacity is very important for the growth of plants. So in these three types of soil, loamy soil is very important, which supports the vegetation by high percolation and high water holding capacity. This is about the soil. In your annual exam, you will get 5 marks question. Explain abiotic factors in an ecosystem, or the explain abiotic factors present in environment. You should explain all the 4 abiotic factors. So coming to the temperature, so in the temperature you explain the temperature is very important for the survival of species, and it varies from one area to other area. And we have 2 organisms are classified into 2 types, euthermal and stenothermal. Euthermal means the organisms can tolerate and thrive in wide range of temperature. Stenothermal means organisms can tolerate and live in narrow range of temperature. And also the temperature affects the kinetics of enzyme. Through that it is going to affect or disturb the basal metabolism and other physiological functions of our body. Then coming to the water, water is very important source, and first life exists in water only. Without water, life cannot exist on this earth. And again, based on the salt concentration, organisms are classified into stenohaline and urehaline. Urehaline means the organisms can tolerate and live in wide range of salinity. They are called urehaline organisms. And stenohaline means the organisms can live in narrow range of salinities. They are called stenohaline. And that salinity, salt concentration is water. It is less than 5 in inland water and between 30 to 35 in sea water, and it is more than 100 parts per 1000 in hypersaline lagoons. Then coming to the light, we know that light is very important. In the photosynthesis occurs in the presence of sunlight. So it mainly helps in photosynthesis in plants, and also it helps in photoperiodism in plants, and also in animals it helps in their foraging, reproductive and migratory activities. And light in the depth of the ocean, the spectrum of light is very important for the survival of benthic animals. And coming to the soil, so soil is very important because it provides water, mineral salts and anchorage to the plants, and type of vegetation mainly depends upon the soil. And there are 3 types of soil: sandy soil, clay soil and loamy soil. In this, loamy soil is very important because it provides high percolation and high water holding capacity. Like this, each one you have to explain separately in your exams, and that salt concentration in water is very important for your competitive exam. So in the next class we will see the adaptations of biotic factors for these abiotic factors for their survival and reproductive purpose. Understood? So I will stop this in this class. Next class will continue with the adaptations. Thank you.